I'm in the Adirondacks to try out camping in the snow. My pack is pretty heavy. I'm borrowing somebody's sleeping bag that's rated for 0 degrees because it's supposed to be in the 20s while I'm here, and it is a very heavy sleeping bag. I have 2 water filters stuffed in my pockets, so hopefully they don't freeze, and so that one can be a backup for the other if one fails. And I have a ton of clothes to keep me warm at night. I would say it's taken me about twice as long to hike through the snow as it would normally, and it definitely feels twice as hard. I made it to the campsite. That hike was about 5.5 miles, which is not very long, but it was extremely difficult. I'm very happy it's over. The snow is really wet, so with every step it was just clinging to my microspikes, and then soon I would have a huge cake of snow on my foot. It was very exhausting. I came a couple days early because I'm hearing that with the eclipse there's going to be a lot of traffic. Camping out here in the freezing cold and snow for a couple days, I hope the eclipse is worth the hype. Got my tent set up. I made a little snow wall over here to try to shield it a bit from the wind, so we'll see if that helps any. Unfortunately, my feet are soaking wet from trudging through all that very wet snow. My hiking boots, I think, were waterproof at one time, but it seems that they no longer are. I have another pair of socks, but I'm kind of hoping to save that for being cozy in my tent at night. So I'm going to try to build a fire and see if I can get warm a little bit, warm up my socks maybe. This may be overly optimistic because all of the sticks are extremely wet, but let's see. My attempt to make fire was a total failure. It is so wet that even a tissue from my pocket, which I thought was totally dry, could not light on fire. So it was totally hopeless. I did get like a little bit of small flames for a little bit, but it died out pretty quickly. It is extremely cold, and it's only going to get colder as the sun goes down. So I think I'm going to eat an early dinner tonight and then go inside my tent and just get warm inside my sleeping bag, which sounds so appealing right now. We have some natural refrigeration on this trip. Tonight, I'm eating the Backpackers Pantry risotto with chicken, which is my favorite of their recipes that I've tried so far. This says to add 1 3/4 cup of boiling water. Now I'm going to pathetically put my hand next to the pot for warmth. Feels so good. I don't know about this snow camping thing so far. It's been so far very uncomfortable and difficult, more so than usual backpacking discomfort. I mean, it's never super comfortable. There's always some difficulty that you encounter, but the biggest problem that I'm having is that my feet are wet, which is just like really, really unpleasant. It's probably a gear failure on my part. Don't have the right footwear for wading through it's about 6 inches of very slushy snow. It's definitely making this snow experience a bit challenging. The good news is, unlike last time I was in the Adirondacks, there are 0 bugs. Okay, I ripped open my tasty meal. It's important to remove this little packet. Hot water's in, then it's time to let it sit for 8 minutes, and then stir it, and then reseal it and let it sit for 7 more minutes. I built some more of the little mini snow wall around my tent. Not sure how effective this is going to be at shielding against the cold wind that is blowing. I guess I'll find out tonight. The risotto is done. Looks delicious. I'm feeling slightly more optimistic now that I have some hot food in me. It was so cold that I was seriously considering just going inside the tent for the afternoon, but I knew that as soon as I did that, I wouldn't be motivated to come back out, and I really needed to eat. I was hungry, and then I was like, okay, this will be even worse if I'm just starving in the middle of the night, which would really suck. So I'm glad that I decided to eat now. The night started off so cold. I was in all my layers, I was in my sleeping bag and inside the silk cocoon. I was still shivering and I was really worried about what the night was going to be like. I was thinking, okay, I may have to leave and not stay another night if I'm shivering all night because this is going to be miserable. Then once my body heated up, the sleeping pad, the sleeping bag, and I think inside the tent, it was actually super comfortable. So I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, oh, I'm warm. This is a nice feeling. I had seen online that often for winter camping, you're supposed to bring 2 pads to insulate you from the ground and keep you warm. I was not able to acquire a second pad in time. I used a foil emergency blanket folded in half underneath my typical Nemo air pad, and then I did lay down my winter coat underneath my torso area, usual air pillow. I had this Kelty Cosmic Down sleeping bag, which is rated for 4 degrees F at the lower limit, and then inside I had one of these silk cocoons. It was in the 20s last night, so I was really happy that my sleep system ended up working. I think also I was able to clear the snow under my tent, and if I hadn't been able to do that, if I had been sleeping on snow and ice, probably the 2 pads would have been necessary. I also slept in a lot of layers. I had 4 silk layers, 2 wool layers, an old cashmere sweater, and this puffy coat on top. For bottoms, I had 2 silk layers and 2 wool layers, 2 pairs of dry socks. The dry socks were so nice. I also wore an earmuff headband, a smart wool under hat layer, and a wool hat. So I had the hats on top. I also drew up the hood of my puffy coat. I had the silk layer over my head. I had the sleeping bag over my head and cinched around my face. It was really cozy, actually. I really did feel like the Pokemon Kakuna when I was all bundled up. I have not managed to get my boots or my pair of socks for hiking fully dry, and also my pair of gloves and mittens are still a bit damp from yesterday. I hung them up inside my tent, but they didn't really dry out. Today, fortunately, it's quite sunny, and it's definitely feeling warmer than yesterday, thank goodness. I'm gonna put those things out, like the gloves and the mittens, in a sunny patch and see if that can dry them out a little bit. What a beautiful day. This is awesome. Yesterday it was feeling pretty bleak. Today is absolutely gorgeous. It's a very standard backpacking breakfast today. Cream cheese on a bagel and some Earl Grey tea. I'm starting to think I might be one of those backpackers who likes camping just a little bit more than hiking. I do like hiking, but when I have an awesome campsite, I am so happy to just hang out at that campsite for multiple days on end. Being at a lake or a pond in the Adirondacks kind of reminds me of in The Secret History when Richard Papin is at Francis's lake house and he says that being at that lake inspires in him this laziness, the likes of which he hasn't really known since childhood. That's how I feel when I'm at a place that's with water in the Adirondacks. Something about it is just so magical. I often intend on these trips to go on multiple hikes, go on more adventures, and then I get to the lake or the pond and I'm just like, you know what? I just want to sit here and relax and like watch the water, listen to the birds, sit around doing an astonishing amount of nothing. It's the best. Somebody asked me recently what I do when I go on these camping trips, and it was a little embarrassing because it was like, well, honestly, not much. When your day to day is just go, go, go all the time, nonstop, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. is usually I'm doing something. There's something so wonderful about just sitting and doing nothing and just appreciating existence and especially nature. The sun has now melted most of the snow on that rocky point where I've been sitting for most of the day today, but there's still a lot of snow in the woods and up in the hill there. And this snowy hill with all the trees just made me think of Ethan Frome. For some reason, when I was in high school, we read Ethan Frome, which now, being an adult, having read more of Edith Wharton's books, I just find that such an odd choice. I wonder if they chose it because it's short and I guess easy to read in comparison with some of the others, although she's not really a particularly hard writer to read, I think. But Ethan Frome is still one of my least favorite things of hers. And at the time I was like, who is this terrible author? I hate this stupid book so much. I've actually never revisited it because I hated it so much. Yeah, so sorry, Edith. I really don't know why they didn't have us read The Age of Innocence, which is so much better and still one of my favorites. Anyway, Ethan Frome is about this man who's living in New England and he just has this totally miserable life. He's unhappy in his marriage and he becomes interested in some lady in town and things go south, of course. So the thing that's just like so stupid to me in this book is they decide that they're going to be New England Romeo and Juliet, and the way that they're going to achieve this is by sledding downhill and smashing into a tree, apparently. which is like the worst suicide plan ever. Yeah, and it doesn't go well, and they end up being injured badly, and then they have to deal with this miserable injury for the rest of their lives. So I always found that frustrating because I was like, Ethan, you're a man who has agency. Make a plan to get out of this town, leave your wife, like do whatever you have to do, but don't resort to this terrible sledding into a tree plan because it is not going to work out. As much as I hated the book, it now lives forever rent-free in my mind, and I do have to say it was very memorable because whenever I see a snowy hill with trees, I think about it. The funny part is whenever I talk about Edith Wharton with my husband, we remember very different things in the books, and so on the topic of Ethan Frome, for some reason the most memorable part to him is apparently they eat fried donuts, which he then became convinced was a very classic New England thing to do, which as a New England person, I guess, I don't know. The other piece of snow-related literature that I can't help thinking about all the time is Jack London's story To Build a Fire, where some poor guy, I don't remember in the story how he gets trapped in Alaska with no one around him, but he's trying to build a fire to survive. And it's just this horrible story about how he's trying to build the fire, finally gets it going. It's very exciting. But he made the crucial mistake of building his fire under a tree, which has branches covered in snow. And so as soon as the fire gets going, it heats up the tree, melts the snow falls down, puts his fire out, and then he dies. Very disappointing. I was feeling a little overly dramatic when I was cold and miserable last night, and I was like, oh, is this going to be my to build a fire moment? Because I was trying to build my fire and it just wouldn't go, and my feet were soaking wet. When I tried to warm them up, they hurt a little bit, so I'm like over dramatic about everything. So I was like, oh no, am I going to lose my toes? I'm not going to lose my toes, it's okay. It is actually still fairly chilly. I would say it's in about the 40s, and I'm actually still wearing all of the layers that I slept in last night, which is many layers, plus my brown coat on top and a pair of rain pants to break the wind. It's pretty windy today, but with the sun out, the sun makes such a difference. It is so nice sitting here in the sun, and it makes the difference for the wind being a little bit chilly and refreshing versus yesterday when it was these horrible icy blasts that made it very difficult to have a good time. I was shivering nonstop. Another line actually from Donna Tartt comes to mind, the part where Richard is staying in this horrible house for winter break that is not properly winterized, I guess you could say. And at some point a hole appears in the roof and he realizes it when he says that he was struck by what could only be described as an icy blast. That was how it felt yesterday, except of course I'm outside.
Lunch, I'm having a tuna salad. I use a tuna packet and Triscuits, and I add some condiments to it to dress it up a little. I'll add a little packet of mayo, and then I brought in olive oil, to which I've added salt, pepper, and some dried scallions that I dehydrated. I was really happy with my tent setup, but then I was walking around my camp and I noticed this birch tree that's leaning kind of ominously right in the path of my tent. Or I should say my tent is right in the path of this birch tree, and I think the tree is dead, although it's a little hard to tell because it goes really far up and the top is obscured by other trees. I think it's unlikely that it would fall and squash me, but I know that has happened to people in the Adirondacks, so I think even though it's really annoying, I'm going to take some time to move my tent over a little bit, which is sad because I'll have to take down my cute little snow wall, which is still lingering even though it's definitely melted a bit. It's always a good idea when you're camping near trees to look for branches or dead trees that might fall down. I often forget, and this is something I should really be more diligent about in the woods. Tent is moved, snow wall is partially rebuilt. It's not 100% as flat as my original site, but I think it'll be fine. Even though it's not a huge change, I think now it's clearly out of path of the birch tree, and there's another tree in between me and it if it does fall, which the chances are unlikely, but me being an anxious person, now that I noticed it, I was just going to be worrying about it all night. Happy to report better luck with getting a fire started tonight. I was able to lay enough sticks out to dry in the sun and found enough small ones. I was able to get it started. It did take several attempts. So even though it's windy, I don't think there's risk of catching anything else on fire because it was so hard to even get this one started in the first place, and the ground is still very wet. It's about 5 p.m.
At this time yesterday, I was already huddled inside my tent in misery. I'm going to now start making my dinner. I think if I make dinner, spend a little time by the fire, I'll probably get into my tent around the time the sun's going down.
I sometimes make my own backpacking dinners if I have time before the trip, but I wasn't able to do that for this one.
So tonight I'm eating another backpacker's pantry meal. This is a new one for me. It's the fettuccine alfredo. The water has boiled, so now it's time to pour it into the pouch and let the food rehydrate. This is really good. Some people online complained about the red peppers, but I like the red pepper. It's Eclipse Day. Previously, the weather report for this region was kind of iffy. It was potentially going to be cloudy. I'm so excited. There is not a single cloud in the sky right now. I'm like weirdly nervous about it though. Hopefully it stays that way. And I'm really looking forward to spending another beautiful day here out in nature and hopefully experiencing this eclipse. I've now camped in the Adirondacks at a few different times of year, and it's really interesting to see how the landscape changes. Really beautiful to experience this place and how it cycles through the seasons. Right now, the hills are just filled with the sound of running water because of all that snow that's melting. And usually you can hear a creek here or there, but everything just sounds like the water is rushing. It's about 11 a.m. and the sky has clouded over a bit. It's looking a bit hazy, but overall it's still sunny, so I think at the very least I'll be able to experience what it's like when it gets totally dark when the eclipse happens. Is there such a thing as super high magnification but also ultralight binoculars? Because if there is, I wish I had them. I always see interesting animals when I'm out here. It's often hard to get a really good look as they can be a little bit far away. It seems like the loons sort of do a daily patrol of the lake. I saw the loons briefly yesterday. One I saw on its own for a little bit, and then a few hours later I saw both of them swim by. That was really great to see. As they swam further away, I wished I could still watch them and see what they were doing. We do have a pair of binoculars at home, and they're pretty good, but they're so bulky and heavy that I rarely bring them on my backpacking trips because my pack was already really heavy with the winter sleeping bag and enough food for the 3.5 days that I'm out here. At twilight last night, I also saw an animal swim by, which I think was a muskrat because it came out on shore. It was doing something I couldn't really see because it was twilight. That was another moment where I was like, wow, I really wish I had some good binoculars right now. When I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do was to go play in the woods. I would be out there for hours at a time. It was not a very big patch of woods. I lived in a suburban subdivision that had a lot of development in the area. There were fortunately some little patches of woods that they did leave behind, like behind the houses. I would spend a lot of time out there alone, but I would also play with other kids. We had this game called Army Training. I guess we imagined we were training for the army for some reason, which is strange because I didn't actually want to be in the army. I think I just wanted to play outside. I think we had this idea that army people would do all these cool extreme outdoor activities. So we would do things like practice crawling on our stomachs through the bushes. Wearing camo was an activity and an aesthetic preference. We would build a lot of stick forts. There were many hours spent building surprisingly large stick forts in the woods. It was so fun. I also distinctly remember just sitting there and looking at things in nature, like looking at baby trees that were growing, looking at moss. I really liked to collect bugs and keep them in my terrarium for a little bit before releasing them, and I would make little sketches of them. Eventually, as I got older, I got caught up in other activities that were mainly indoors, like music was a big one, so I stopped playing outside. So when I started backpacking,
which was actually after I turned 30. So it was like a long break in there. But when I started backpacking, it felt so great because it kind of felt like a return to things that I had originally really loved. And it's in some ways it's even more fun because it's like I don't have to go inside for dinner. I get to just stay out here for multiple days at a time. Of course, as an adult, things are more complicated. Although compared to other adults, my life is not complicated because I'm not really taking care of anyone at this point in my life. But still, you know, there's schedules that you have to arrange. You have to figure out how you're going to get to the place because I'm arranging the time off from work if it's going to be on weekdays. So it is more complicated, but it's also so worth it to just get out here and be out in nature for several days at a time. It's the absolute best.
Not totally sure how to describe the feeling of being licked by a butterfly. It kind of feels like very small little pokes, I guess. It's about 1:30. The sky is definitely still hazy, so once I put on my Eclipse glasses, these are my normal sunglasses. When I put on the Eclipse glasses, I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to see of the actual moon crossing. Something that's kind of interesting so far is I know it doesn't start until about 2:30, although I realized that I stupidly didn't write down the exact times and bring them out here with me, so I know that the whole event lasts from around 2:30 to 4 or so. So I'm just going to kind of be watching the whole time. Up until now, it's fascinating how little sign there is that something really unusual is about to happen, and it just makes me think about how terrifying and mysterious it must have been for ancient people who had no idea what was going on. That must have been such a crazy experience for them. Meanwhile, we're still going over here. This butterfly is being very thorough. The camera's not quite good enough to catch it. One of these days, I would have to get some kind of telephoto lens or something. The loons are out there. They're fishing. I've been watching them dive into the lake. They come up about a minute or two later with little fish in their mouth. Even though it's still early, I keep feeling tempted to look at the sun to see how the progress is coming along. I know it's not a good idea, so I'm going to get my Eclipse sunglasses out. It's definitely warmer today, and anywhere where the sun hits, the snow has melted. It's starting. It's just the very beginning. I can just see a tiny little tip of the moon starting to cross in front of the sun. This is so cool. Even though it's still a bit hazy, it seems like that's not going to obstruct any view of the moon, so yay. I was not able to get my act together to get any special camera equipment, nor honestly do I know how to use it to get video or photo of the actual eclipse, but I'll just run my camera while it's going on and hopefully capture some of the amazing darkness. It's 2:43 p.m. More of the moon is now definitely visible across the sun. The thing that's really interesting is so far the daylight has not yet been affected. So if you didn't know the eclipse was going on, I don't think you would realize what was happening. I think I'm going to park myself on this little spit of land and watch from here because there's a really clear view of the sky. It's almost 3 p.m. and now the sun looks like a little croissant when I look at it with the Eclipse glasses. I feel like just now it's starting to get a little darker, although I'm not sure if I'm imagining it. That was such a beautiful and interesting experience, and I'm so grateful that I got to be out here to see it. It's kind of interesting looking back at the footage. I don't think the iPhone camera fully captured how dark it did get. Although it wasn't ever fully dark like nightfall, it felt similar to twilight, but the colors were very different. I think because there was still some light available, so the sky above the pine trees, this also wasn't really captured by the camera. It looked like this dark blue, but it almost leaning into violet. It was really beautiful and eerie. I was surprised by how bright it remained up until the moment of totality and how bright it got not long after. Obviously, the full eclipse doesn't last for very long, but it felt so brief. And it was surprising how much just a sliver of the sun really can still light up the sky. And also not captured by the camera, I did see the diamond ring phenomenon, which was just incredible. It's not often that we get these very stark reminders of the reality of our planet being a rock floating around in space and our solar system, and just how amazing and unusual it is that life did form here in all of the ways that it has. Especially realizing the rarity of that life, it makes me appreciate even more the gift of being able to enjoy a wild place like this, that the state of New York has preserved the Adirondacks so that we still have this natural place to go to. It's a really amazing achievement. I hope it's a place that can persist. There are always challenges to conserved wild areas, and there always is uncertainty about how well these wild places really are protected. Right now, in the Boundary Waters and also in a wildlife refuge in Georgia, there are potential mining developments that are proposed right on the borders of those places that could really destroy the quality and the longevity of the nature that is held within those areas. So it's something people always do need to be vigilant about and to appreciate what we have and to help protect it. I'm hoping to wrap up early tonight and go to bed early because I do want to get an early start tomorrow on hiking out. Although it seems like a lot of the snow is melted, which is good because hopefully that'll make hiking out a little easier. My pack is still slightly more heavy than I'm accustomed to because of all the winter gear, so it might still take me a bit longer than usual. So I'm going to try to get that early start tomorrow, which is always a challenge for me, so we'll see how it goes. Tonight's dinner is a repeat of that backpacker's pantry risotto. When I find something I like, I stick with it. So I have my water boiling, and meanwhile I'm going to work on building a fire. When you find a place that really gets into your soul, it hurts to leave. I don't feel like that with every place I've been to, but there are a few special places. This is one. Grand Canyon is definitely another. And there's other places where you're like, okay, I'm ready to go home now. But this is one where, even though I do want to go home, I'm never ready to leave.